Welcome back everyone to another build showcase for Outer Worlds 2, where we finally dive into a melee build. I have been working on making this build for quite some time now, as melee in Outer Worlds 2 is quite frankly not super good, especially so on very hard difficulty where death is inevitable. But worry not, this build is pretty much the fruit of all of my efforts of figuring out what is good and what is not to create one of the best melee builds possible. And even though it's definitely not as strong as just melting everything with a gun, this build provided me with quite possibly my favorite playthrough, because smashing things in the head with a flaming shotgun hammer is just fucking awesome. I do want to say this build should absolutely crush anything below very hard, but if you are preparing to do a melee run on very hard, then it is definitely not for the faint of heart. The first third of the game, you will die a lot. It will test your patience and mental, but when the build gets rolling, you will feel like a true badass. It is worth mentioning that just about everything in the endgame in Outer Worlds 2 is built to screw over melee as much as humanly possible. So I'll name just a few to make sure you are prepared for what you are about to get into. The endgame will have running landmines, spiders that shoot you with webs so you can't run, bugs that shoot you with their cold goo so you can hardly move at all, Mike Tyson gorilla birds that will kill you in one punch to the head, turrets that you can't reach with a melee weapon, and dudes with rocket pistols that will blow your head off as you run at them. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but I think that's the gist of it. As always, I will have a full leveling guide in the description. Now let's get to the foundation of the build, character creation. The character creation for this build will set the tone. Background, as always, is up to you and who you want your warrior to be. There really is no specific backstory that is great for this build, but as many people have mentioned, ex-convict is the best backstory for opening up certain skill checks in the endgame that you wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. If ex-convict is not your cup of tea, then as someone who likes paladins, Lawbringer could make some sense with this build. It has some kind of paladin vibes in the sense that you will be smiting down evil with the use of flames and a hammer. So there is that. Now for traits, we are going to be using a new combo. First up is Heroic. Yes, this is going to be a leadership build. I know a lot of people think that companions suck, but for melee builds in particular, they are absolutely fantastic, and I could not recommend them more. But with that being said, I will have an explosive variant in the leveling guide for people that cannot stand companions. We will get into why leadership is great more in the stats section. The second trait we will grab is Brawny. Brawny is a 100% must-have on any melee build. This quite honestly might be the single best trait in the game, but it is sort of just regulated to close quarters builds. You'll absolutely need to abuse Brawny to get through your playthrough as a melee character. Basically, you will just sprint at an enemy to stun them for a few seconds and then beat the hell out of them without them being able to fight back. This is especially potent with one of the weapons we grab early on, basically allowing us to keep the enemies in a permanent CC cycle. Of course, the negative trait we will be going with is Dumb, as the others would be extremely negative for this style of playthrough. Unless of course you are using this for a Psycho playthrough, which it is pretty decent for, then you could go with Abrasive for once instead. Before starting the skill section, I do want to mention this is another easily distracted build. Easily distracted is the ideal way to play in my opinion, especially on builds that are heavily reliant on getting more stats, like a melee build. Melee needs all the stats possible it can to survive on very hard. So for those of you that do not know, easily distracted is a flaw that if you follow my leveling guide perfectly will pop up at level 4. Easily distracted will give you an extra stat point every level until the end of the game, which allows you to not only be a lot stronger, but also pass more skill checks. The downside is that you will not be able to pick any other stats outside of the main 5. In this build you will have no reason to, but if you do, you will absolutely destroy your build and be much weaker, because you'll be forced to level it up to the same as the rest of your stats. It's extremely crucial that you do not, under any circumstance, level any other stats. Your endgame skills should look something like this if you follow the guide in the description. For the first skill, let's talk about Leadership. As mentioned when we picked the Heroic trait, Leadership is extraordinarily powerful in melee builds for a number of reasons. Number one is that we will have no range, so being able to pick Azza and commanding her to kill a sniper that is sitting in a distant tower allows us more survivability, and means we do not have to run across an entire battlefield to reach them. Leadership also means the companions will be able to soak much more damage, making it so that we are not getting focused on 24/7. It also makes our companions do more damage, which honestly, melee builds do a lot of damage, but we won't really have any means of AoE, so it is difficult to kill groups of things quickly. Lastly, Val in particular is extremely good with a melee commander. As long as she is alive in the mid and end game, it's pretty much impossible for you to die with all the support and pocket healing she will provide for you. The two leadership adjacent perks we are going to grab are Inspiring Commander for the cooldown reduction on killing enemies, and Negotiator, which I think is an elite perk for the cooldown reduction alone, but the cheaper prices are also quite nice. Next up is Speech. Speech, as we all know by now, is the best skill in Outer Worlds 2 by far. Not only for dialogue, but it has some amazing perks. For this build, it will be Space Ranger for a damage boost in the endgame, but more importantly, Intimidator and Grim Visage. These are two of the most powerful perks in the game. For melee, it's an absolute godsend to be able to CC an entire pack of enemies just by killing one of them. This really alleviates damage at some points in the game when you are getting overwhelmed. Melee really needs all the tools in the arsenal to be able to survive. Next is of course the melee tree. For melee, we grab Run and Hitter for a large damage boost out of Sprint, Pitch Tossball Hacker for the added armor penetration to those hard to kill enemies, and Tit for Tat for some very much needed lifesteal. There are some glaring omissions in the form of Heavy-Handed and Duelist, so I'll talk about why briefly. Heavy-Handed is pretty simple actually. It is simply just outclassed by the Brawny trait. You really do not need Heavy-Handed plus Brawny plus the other CC we have, so it's just more valuable early on to grab more survivability. Duelist is another kind of simple explanation. This build absolutely destroys melee enemies. The only ones that put up any sort of fight are the aforementioned Mike Tyson Gorilla Birds. So with that being said, even though I absolutely love parrying playstyles, it really offers no benefits in this game. To be honest, melee enemies will either be CC'd or dead 99% of the time if you are comboing correctly. Which brings us to the crucial defensive section, Science and Engineering. First with Science, we will grab the core very hard perks of Rapid Recharge and Contingency Screen. These are your lifeblood on very hard as a melee character, and will continuously save your life. We need all the defense we can get, and there is none better than these two perks. Which brings us to the other defensive tree in Engineering, which as a matter of fact there is one singular perk that's better than the other two, and that is Makeshift Armor. If you're ever struggling with a hard boss, simply go craft a ton of anything you want to get yourself up to 200, 300, 400 armor, and then win the fight with ease. This perk is legitimately just broken, and we will definitely be abusing it for melee. As again, we could really just use every bit of survivability that we can find. Also, Engineering level 18, of course, just gives us an innate 18% damage reduction, which is just nice. For this build, we do get a couple of very valuable perks that do not belong to a skill, the first two of which are Bullet Shield and Shrug It Off. These two again will simply make us much tankier. I personally do not notice a difference at all of more enemies attacking me when I have Bullet Shield on, because they always are attacking me anyway, so we might as well just grab an extra 10% more health and damage reduction. Shrug It Off is also really insane as it gives us much more health to work with over the course of a fight, if and when our teammates start going down. The very first perk we will be getting is Ninja, which grants you with a very significant boost to your evasion. I cannot stress this enough. On very hard difficulty, your means of survival will be extremely reliant on your ability to maneuver around a battlefield, behind cover, and running around like a madman straight at your enemies. This is where Ninja comes into play. You will really not survive on very hard by just standing there blocking or trying to tank shots. You will need to constantly be on the move, and this really applies to every build on very hard, but it's especially true for melee builds. This is also why I absolutely under no circumstance recommend ever using heavy armor, as the extra 5% damage reduction is in no way better than being able to dodge more projectiles and close the gap on your enemies faster. So with that out of the way, let's dig into some relevant flaws. The first one I want to briefly mention is Sungazer. You might be tempted to use this perk as health regen would in fact be really nice for melee, but it puts a god-awful filter over your screen So for that reason alone, I absolutely would never ever recommend this. The benefits would be nice though. The next relevant one is of course Easily Distracted. This will allow us to super boost our commander, becoming way stronger, tankier, and pass more skill checks, as long as you follow the leveling guide exactly as it is in the description. And then lastly, we have Anger Mismanagement, which makes your power attack stronger at the cost of your blocking. I've seen some people say this is a very bad flaw, but I absolutely disagree. Blocking in very hard is not stopping your death, it is only delaying your death. So you might as well go all out and simply just do more damage. I will also mention that I personally did power attacks with the weapon of choice we will go over 99% of the time. You will just end up doing more damage with power attacks in this build. Gadgets, surprisingly, are not super important to the build. The shield will of course be the one you will want to use, but most of our science energy will be siphoned from our helmet, so you will not have very much for shielding. However, the helmet will only protect us from projectiles, so whenever you are in melee only combat, you should be using the shield as much as possible. For the early game, quite frankly, you will be in a very tough spot. None of the early weapons are good and your survivability is still in the dumpster. If you want to make your playthrough more enjoyable, then I honestly just recommend using a gun for the first 6 or so levels, but if you are devoted to the melee, then I recommend just picking up a trip blade early on and trying your hardest. This is what I did just to get a feel for it, and it's honestly kinda brutal. Even if you do decide to go with melee, you will still want to go pick yourself up a shock machine gun from the armory, as there will be annoying flying drones and turrets that are unreachable, that are better dealt with a ranged weapon. Your true goal on the first island will be getting the weapon Thunderstruck from the Skycutter A102 Fortress. This will be the first time in your playthrough where you start to feel pretty damn strong. Thunderstruck is an absolute beast of a weapon. Once you acquire Thunderstruck, you can pretty much just permanently crowd control any individual target you want, and because of that, this weapon makes very quick work of the final boss on the island. Thunderstruck, if you use the power attack, is an immediate full electric buildup, which will stun enemies for a few seconds. If you time your next power attack for immediately when the first one ends, then you will have them permanently crowd controlled. So basically your bread and butter will be to run into them to proc Brawny, then beat them with power attacks until they all die, while they cannot move at all from being permanently electrically stunned. Another extremely valuable piece of armor, as I alluded to earlier, is the Tactical Trajectile Defense Dome. You can get this very early on in the Ministry of Accuracy high security lockbox. This will stay with you for your whole playthrough, and will be the primary reason you stay alive the entire time. It will deflect hard-hitting enemy projectiles like rockets from damaging you at the cost of your gadget energy. Lastly, we do have Scoundrel's Aegis on the first island, which can give you a solid health boost with the combination of heroic and your companions. With that being said, it is light armor, so you can get killed extremely fast with it. And if you have trouble with survival, then I advise swapping to any medium armor to see if you like that more. The second area brings along new choices for maximum bonk. The Wham Bam will be your weapon of choice as soon as you are able to kill the Dunsany brothers bounty. This will probably happen around level 15. The Wham Bam is an extremely powerful plasma shotgun hammer that deals significantly more damage than Thunderstruck, and by the time you acquire it, you should have more forms of crowd control from companions and perks that allow you to leave your Thunderstruck behind. You can eventually acquire a weapon called the Tremor Cleaver later on that can compete with the Wham Bam, but quite frankly, it is just not as cool in my opinion, and it's only for the last 2 hours of the game, so I wouldn't really worry about it. As always, for your second weapon, I would recommend some kind of ranged shock weapon, simply to deal with annoying flying enemies and turrets. For your armor, I do recommend swapping over to the Acquiescence as soon as you hit the second planet. This thing will greatly increase your survivability from not only the damage reduction, but also the added gadget energy. I do also think it is worth mentioning that mods really do matter for this build, so picking the right ones is crucial, which is why for our armor mod, we're going with the Emergency Deflectors. This is basically a permanent 20% damage reduction, as our science will never not be below 50%, both from our helmet and gadget shield. And for our helmet mod, I like using the Kinetic Pulse Redistributor. This really helps alleviate crowds by stunning everything, allowing you to beat on all of them with impunity for a while. To summarize, there will basically be 3 eras for this build. the pre-Thunderstruck era, which is categorized by feelings of hopelessness, death, and despair, the post-Thunderstruck era, which will be filled with feelings of hope yet uncertainty, and finally, you'll reach the Wham Bam Full Armor Plus Mod era, which is noted for its feelings of godhood and maximum bonkage. Companions are crucial for this leadership build, and there is no one even close to as powerful as Val. I know I ranked her last in my companion video, and I do think that was a slight mistake. Valerie is so insanely good for melee characters. She's the perfect support, dishing out endless heals, overshields, movement speed, armor, extra damage, and she'll even freeze enemies, so they attack less and are easier for you to reach. She is basically what Marisol is to ranged commanders. Incredibly powerful and a must-have if you care about combat. For your second companion, I like two choices a lot. Those are Azza and Tristan. Azza basically acts as your ranged damage. You point her at a sniper off in the distance and she will take care of them for you. This makes her better for open areas. Tristan, on the other hand, helps soak more damage and crowd control enemies with you. I think Azza might be slightly better, but using a Deathball comp with the Bruise Brothers of yourself and Tristan is super satisfying, permanently knocking enemies over and being invincible with another Hammer Bro next to you. All the while, Val keeps you guys going. I do have 2 more builds for Outer Worlds 2 on the way, so if you like this one, be sure to like and subscribe for more. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.